Today's story takes place off the coast of Somalia, a country in Africa. If you look at Africa on a map, you'll see Somalia on the east coast, right on the water of the Indian Ocean. In fact, of all the countries in Africa, Somalia is the one with the longest coastline. And for the Americans listening, to give you an idea how big it is, Somalia is almost the same size as the U.S. state of Texas. But here's the thing about Somalia. It's considered to be one of the poorest countries in the world. I mean, here in Florida, we have homeless people. Some of you know I work with a group here to help the homeless population get the things they need. But in Somalia, literally half of the people in that country don't have a home or any kind of permanent residence. This means there are millions of people who are desperate and hungry, and they're vulnerable to abuse. And just on the north side of Somalia is the Gulf of Aden. This is a very popular water route for large ships carrying lots of cargo, headed either to or from the Suez Canal. In fact, each year there are about 20,000 of these ships passing by. That's more than 50 ships every single day. So there's a certain sector of the Somali population who sees all of this valuable cargo going by each day, and they see an opportunity to make money. These are modern-day pirates. They see many of these big ships as easy targets. I mean, if there's a large cargo ship carrying manufactured goods, they just want to get from point A to point B. They typically aren't equipped to fight off or defend their ship from being hijacked and held for ransom. But today we're going to hear a story from Robert. There was a time he was on one of those big ships, off the coast of Somalia. The pirates saw it as easy money. What they didn't see was that Robert's ship, the one being attacked, was a warship in the U.S. Navy. Real people in unreal situations.
There is a man standing in front of me in my bedroom.
My friend has been shot.
I'm literally inside the river, and I'm inside my car.
He had told me multiple times that he was going to set himself on fire.
If you say my name or try to look at me, I'm going to kill you.
And he was just sobbing. He said, Mom, tell me you're going to be okay.
And I jumped on the hood of the car, and I held on.
And I looked into the garage, and he was hanging from the rafters.
I had somebody standing on my neck.
He's better to me dead. I want him dead.
I'm Scott Johnson, and this is What Was That Like? Before we get into the action part of the story, I want to kind of set this up so people have a good picture of what's going on here. You are on a Navy ship called the USS Nicholas, and it's classified as a frigate.
Correct.
What does that mean? How big was it? What was the ship like?
The Oliver Hazard Perry class ships, they've all been decommissioned. But at the point in time, this thing was 553 feet long. It was about 47 feet wide. And it was the smallest warship that the Navy had. We were designed initially for anti-submarine warfare, which is, us trying to find subs, obviously. And that was specifically my job. I was a sonar technician. So I hunted, tracked subs, classified subs, torpedoes, things of that sort. I was in charge of the torpedo tubes, as a matter of fact, for a little while. That was kind of fun. But it was obviously, this is, even though it's a small ship in Navy standards, it's a pretty big ship, though. How many people are on the boat? When I first got there, the initial crew was something like 220 something. There was about, around there, 220, 230. By the time I left, oh God, we desperately needed people. We were so undermanned that we were busting our asses every day and every night. But the cool thing about being on a ship, especially, I know it's like that for military and police and things of that sort. There's that brotherhood that they talk about. They usually stick fresh officers, JOs, like ensigns and Lieutenant JGs and lieutenants on the frigates and stuff so they can learn their stuff, and then they can start moving up to bigger ships as, if they're on their way to leading a vessel. Everyone was real cool with each other. The atmosphere was cool. Everyone was there to do their job and work, and we'd hang out, and that was pretty much it. There weren't testosterone pumped usually about halfway through a deployment, but we're all just eager to go home. And that was about as far as I got, really.
All right, so the ship was designed primarily for anti-submarine warfare, but during this time when this event happened, you were in the Indian Ocean,
Yes.
international waters just west of the Seychelles, which, for people not familiar, that's a group of like over 100 islands, and that's several hundred miles east and south of Somalia, which is a coastal country in Africa.
Which is very, very big piracy action going on over there.
It seems like that's whenever we hear pirates or pirates being in the news, it's always Somalian pirates. And I assume that's because the country is in disarray and is overrun with poverty, and it's just a way to make quick money.
It's to the point where people are being shanghaied into it. So you really didn't have a choice sometimes.
And that's one of the reasons that the USS Nicholas was in the area. You were running counter-piracy operations.
Yes. That, and there was more to it. So Africa Partnership Station was, due to the fact that Somalia, the piracy has gotten so bad, that's when they were starting to board cruise liners and things of that sort. So we did African Partnership Station, which is where we went over there and we started to help train their military in counter-piracy operations as well. And the US and NATO was funding a majority of it. So not just counter-piracy ops, but we were doing a lot of training too. We had like whole groups on our ship that were sleeping, in the same berthings as us, eating with us, trying to learn and everything, but they weren't usually around the ship. They were mainly speaking to the security groups and boarding teams.
I understand you guys had like somebody was watching all the time around the clock for any activity anywhere around the ship. How did you track that, or what was the watch like?
We had our forward and aft lookouts. We had our bosun mates or our undes. Those guys were out there with night vision goggles and binoculars and the sound-powered phones, which I guess now would be a good time to explain sound-powered phones. I kind of have to equate it to like using a can with a string. Except, okay, so there was a little plate that sat on your chest, and it had a little thing that went around your neck, and connected to the plate was a set of headphones, and there was a little arm with a hinge on it. And at the end was a microphone with a button on top of it that swiveled as well. So you would push the button and your voice would be able to travel through the line and to whomever else it was dialed to. And we could hear it like that. The good thing about it was it didn't require batteries. It didn't require anything. You just plugged it into the ship, you screwed it down in there, and you were immediately, able to do sound checks and talk to people. So we had those guys out there, but we also had our bridge crew and our gun watches. We had a mounted 50 cal in the front, 50 caliber, big, beautiful automatic weapons. If you've ever seen Rambo, I think it was like, not the last one, but the one connected to it was the gun connected to the truck on a swivel. And the thing was just, no human should be fired at with that thing. It's massive. So we had 2 in the front on either side. We had 2 midships, which was, halfway through the ship, which is where I was. And then we had a man in the back with it was a portable gun, but it fired the same caliber bullet as a 50 caliber.
Okay. And the back is what is called the flight deck?
Correct. It was on the flight deck.
So you were kind of in the middle of the ship.
Yes, I was up a story too. I was on the O2 level. During the day, I stood under the mast, but the guns were directly next to the mast. So I'm halfway up the ship. Okay. And I'm 1 story up.
And this happened at nighttime. It was just after midnight. How were you outfitted as far as what you were wearing at the time?
It was Africa. So we were in coveralls. We were usually in coveralls out to sea anyway. The super sweet janitor outfit, big poofy, 1 big zipper. It was great if you had to pee because there's a zipper from the bottom too. And they're just baggy and they're blue and they're nice. And we had that. We had our flak jackets on. We had a helmet. We had walkie-talkies. And we were using the walkie-talkies up until the event that we needed to use our sound-powered phones. And then we checked out night vision goggles at night. I don't think we had them up during the day because those things are expensive as hell.
Well, you wouldn't need them during the day, right?
Well, naturally. I mean, I just figured, somebody would hang them up. That's kind of something that would happen.
And is a flak jacket, how does it compare to something like a bulletproof vest?
Well,
or is it anything like that at all?
From what I understand, I actually can't honestly answer this for you because my flak jackets were just the flak jackets. We didn't even have the inserts. So it was just like a really heavy vest. I can tell you this though, my 50 cals, the 50 cals were plated. So on either side, it swiveled in the middle, but it was set up on a stand. So it's set up on a tripod mounted to the deck. And then there's plates in front of the legs. There's 3 of them in front of the legs, which protect my legs to my waist, roughly, like my upper thigh, my waist. I'm not very tall. These are just not very big plates, but they're heavy as shit. And then you have 2 on either side of the barrel. So you can see the sights, and then there's plates on either side, and you have this section in between that you can look as you're swimming it around and everything.
So if it's nighttime and the opposition sees fire coming from your spot, if they fire back at that, chances are they're going to hit metal rather than hitting you.
Unless they get lucky or unless they're really proficient.
Right. What we're going to talk about, like I said, it was just after midnight and it was completely dark, but there was a full moon.
Yes.
And radar picked up activity.
I was on the midwatch, which starts at 10 p.m. and it ends at 2. And we usually, relieve each other about a half hour early, sometime around that. I mean, we did on my ship. So, like 9:30 to 1:30 was really the watch. And I was about to get off watch since, it just happened after midnight. That day was April 1st. So there's that. I went around trying to tell the story and nobody believed me. So just after midnight, I'm about to get off watch and my ship was about to pull in Reunion or Seychelles or Mauritius, but I spoke to one of my shipmates and we're pretty sure it's Seychelles. So what ends up happening is radar reports that something was coming towards us off the starboard bow, starboard being right, port being left. So something's coming off our starboard bow, which is Mount 55, which is where I stood. And I'm looking with the night vision goggles and I kind of see it coming in. They tell us to switch to sound powered phones. The issue with the sound powered phones is they don't work with the helmet on. So I got to take my helmet off. And then I got these big ass headphones on and I'm, everyone's quiet on the line. We're just receiving information. That incoming target split into 2 and one had gone forward, one had gone aft and they circled us. Well, I saw the one coming after us that went forward, so it turned in my direction left. I unplugged my phones and I ran to the other side to Mount 56. And as I'm going to plug them in, I see this skiff go around back towards port. So I think that he went around front, turned around and went back around. I unplug my phones. I plug them back in on starboard side and it comes, I see this object come around again and it sits by my flight deck and it's just sitting there. It's quiet, dead quiet, except for my headphones. I actually had my iPod in. At that point in time, I didn't even think to rip my headphones out. So they're sitting there and it was probably like a couple minutes and it was real quiet. I'd say it was easily the longest couple minutes I've ever had. I had taken my night vision goggles off in the event that I had to fire. I don't want to blind myself. I've never shot them with, shot with night vision goggles on. It's pitch black. The moon was out. The moon was full. It was behind my ship. So these guys are sitting in the shadow of my ship and it's bright. If you've never seen the moon at sea, it's just, it's beautiful. It's the most illuminating thing, but they're in my shadow and it's pitch black in that shadow. I'm kind of squinting, trying to see what's going on. Hopefully they're not doing anything crazy. And I see them spray the flight deck. I don't know why they sprayed the flight deck. I didn't know exactly why at that time, I should say. But my buddy Schoonmaker was back there and he was the one on the 240. He had the M240 with him.
When you say spray the flight deck, you're talking about firing a weapon at the flight deck.
Yeah, he had it. He just held it, squeezed the trigger and, sprayed from one side to the other. I didn't know what happened to Schoonmaker, so I screamed for him over the sound powered phones. I called, I said, Schoon, and he didn't answer. So I pulled the trigger and I started shooting back. By the law, I had inherent right to self-defense, defense of others, and defense of federal property, and yada, 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 yada.
So you didn't have to contact a supervisor or something saying, hey, is it okay to return fire?
He was on the line with us, but when I did not hear him, I actually had the right to go ahead and do what I did. I called for them. I shot. Well, whatever they were shooting at wasn't as important. My gun is huge and it's loud. So they started shooting back at me. That's what started, we had a little volley between us. We were all trained to shoot the 50 cal in 3 to 5 round bursts. And it sounds, I don't know, it seems vulgar. So 3 rounds, when you squeeze the trigger, it's die motherfucker. And that's doo, doo, doo. And then die motherfucker die is 5 rounds. Die motherfucker die. And that's how it shoots. Do, 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 do. So that's how I was shooting. And the issue was, it was so dark, I had to wait until I was being shot at to even see where I was shooting, because they were floating around here and there and everywhere. So they're kind of bobbing. They're really low to the water. So we're going back and forth. Now, Schoonmaker was fine, for anybody that might be worried. Schoonmaker was just fine. Apparently, he had taken his sound-powered phones off because the cord didn't reach the other side of the ship. I didn't know that, obviously. And what's even funnier is the reason why they even sprayed their shot at the flight deck was because my buddy Lenny, he gets up, he walked across the flight deck, and he was trying to get in the ship. But someone on the other side was holding it down because they thought that we had been boarded. On the 1MC, our captain got on. The 1MC is basically like an intercom throughout the ship. And you can direct where you want the sound to go. So he cut it from the outside for them to, for him to project his voice saying, hey, there's pirates. He didn't want us on the outside to know. So he had it only on the inside. So he made the announcement that pirates were there. My buddy gets up because on his sound powered phones, they said, get your ass inside. He got up, walked across the flight deck, tried to get in, couldn't get, walked back across. I guess that's when they saw him. Maybe that's when they saw Schoonmaker, and that's when they shot. We're retiring fire back and forth. Again, I'm doing 3 to 5 round bursts. I say that because I let off of the trigger at one point and I saw my plate to my left, the one that's mounted to the gun, flash. So these guys are, AK-47s, you just hold the trigger down, the bullets are going everywhere. So these guys are close.
And just to get a picture of the boat that they were in, I think you called it a skiff. This is a small boat, right? Like maybe 20, 30 feet, or was it even that big?
I don't remember the length of it, honestly. It wasn't very big. The 3 people were on this skiff. They seem like they had enough room, but I can't see it being extremely comfortable. They had 5 55-gallon drums of fuel in this thing. How we didn't hit them is a miracle, because honestly, I don't know how I would feel if I had ignited a barrel and blown people up. Not to mention, they were close to us. We're firing back and forth. I honestly don't know how long this firefight went between the two of us. I know Mark was fine. And eventually it got to the point where somebody kicked that engine and they took off. Well, we hadn't really had a good solid plan for when pirates came and actually attacked us at that point in time. So we only had one engine online. They were way faster than us at that point in time. We took off after them. I kind of equated to like the Star Trek Enterprise. It was cool. We were trying to speed up after them, and then we hit warp drive as soon as our second engine got online, and we were just taking off after these guys. We're following them on radar, and they were walking away from us. They're opening up from us pretty well. So we catch up to them. We had to get permission. Our CO had contacted whomever they contact. That's not my game. They contacted whomever to say, hey, look, we already got in a gunfight. Things are started here. And so we're waiting for permission to come back to be boarded. But we were in an area where our radio was just so spotty. As we catch up to these guys, you see one of them standing up and he's waving his hands. We have our spotlight on these guys and we got everything on them. And one of them's waving their hands, and the other 2 are using barrels to just ditch, or buckets to ditch water. These guys are sinking, and they're sinking fast.
So that's why you were able to catch up to them.
Essentially, yes, we were catching them. So it took a little while before we were able to actually get the go ahead to board them.
And how do you even do that? Do you send a small boat toward them, or okay? So what's the process with that?
We have there's a team called VBSS, Visit, Board, Search, and Seizure. And they get on a RIB, which stands for Rigid Hull Inflatable Boat. You know those movies, those action movies where they're in like this inflatable looking thing, but it's hauling balls through the water and it's just packed down full of dudes. That's exactly it. We got VBSS onto the rib, and we kept the rib on the other side of them, so that way they were able to be lowered down without any incidents. Maybe they're going to try to do something before the VBSS got there and then I don't know. So all I know is I manned my gun. I didn't move from my position after that. So after we caught up, one was waving their hands. The other two are ditching water. And as soon as we catch up to them, one of them takes the mag light. It was a mini mag light. You know, those big ass flashlights that cops have? They had a mini, the little small ones. Those things are awesome, by the way. Awesome. I love those mag lights. Everyone had our night vision goggles on. And we're just watching these guys, but you couldn't see shit because of that flashlight, the way he held it. But you could see splashes on either side of the skiff. So they basically knew, thanks to the Geneva Convention, we're saved, so we're not going to drown, but we got stuff on here that we need to get rid of. So they're basically tossing weapons. They tossed everything off to the side that they still had on board. And that included radio equipment. So the time comes, VBSS comes around the corner. They pick these guys up. They bring them back on board. There was so much that happened after that. And I was watching these guys. I had the captain come up talking to me. XO, they're attaboying me. I was getting slapped on the back. I'm like, I don't know what the hell to think of all this. My adrenaline was through the roof. Eventually, I got relieved from my watch. I did see them get boarded. I did see them being detained, and I did see them coming back. After that, somebody came up and finally said, all right, go to bed. I said, roger that. I will. So I go to bed. I wake up. It's like 7 something in the morning. They told me to go ahead and just sleep. So I wake up and it's like 7 something. We're supposed to be pulling in at 8, but I wake up to the 1MC saying, hey, we just found their mother skiff and we're boarding them now.
This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp Online Counseling. We all feel relieved that 2020 is way behind us. It's definitely a year we'll all remember, and for some not so good reasons. But stress, anxiety, and depression don't necessarily go away just because time has gone by. Maybe you're dealing with some of these things still, and you're not alone. And you don't need to get these things resolved by yourself. That's where BetterHelp comes in. As soon as you contact BetterHelp, the first thing they'll do is assess your needs and what's going on, and then they'll match you up with your own licensed professional therapist. And it happens pretty quickly. You're communicating within 48 hours. You can log in and message your counselor literally anytime, 24/7, and you have access to them every week, either by phone or by video. Need to change counselors? That's free and easy to do. BetterHelp Online Counseling is available worldwide, and there's a broad range of expertise available, some of which may not even be an option with the offline counselors that are just in your local area. BetterHelp is actually less expensive than the traditional go-to-the-therapist office counseling, and on top of that, financial aid is available if you need it, and you never even need to leave home. And because you listen to this podcast, you can get started and save some money. This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp, and you can get 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/whatwas. You don't need to go and sit on a therapist's couch. You can stay home and sit on your own. Visit betterhelp.com/whatwas and get 10% off your first month. And thanks to BetterHelp for sponsoring this podcast.
There were another 2 pirates. Those guys were all in, those 2 were teams. I don't know how we got them. Again, I was knocked out. So we got them. That's all I know.
After you took these 3 guys, the 3 initial attackers off the boat, I read that you sunk their ship or blew it up. What's the process on that?
So after we got them, we got them back on board, and we're supposed to tow the boat at that point in time. We circled it for a little bit, and we got on what's called the 25 millimeter, and we fired at the thing, and it blew up, and it was really cool. Like, it was really, really cool. Like this big ass fireball. Again, it's midnight. Well, at this point in time, it was probably like 2-3 o'clock in the morning, but it's pitch black minus the full moon, this skiff, and that fireball. And it was badass. It didn't make a noise. We couldn't film it. I guess we were far away enough to where it didn't make a noise. I don't remember a noise. Maybe my ears weren't. I don't know. But it didn't make a noise, but I felt the heat hit. And that was, I don't know. I was blown away by that.
Did it blow up so spectacularly because of the tanks of fuel?
Yes, that's exactly where they were aiming, was all the fuel. And then we were supposed to circle it until the fire went out. But we ended up circling it for a couple hours. Once it died down a good amount, that's when we were able to leave after the mother skiff. By that time, they'd come on board. We had a translator on board, and they were interrogating these guys, and they were telling us some crazy stuff. So here's one of the facts that I found out about it is that they had an RPG with them, and one of them had an RPG hoisted up on his shoulder, and he was about to fire it, but the person who had the AK-47 was the newest one on that skiff. So when I guess he got nervous and he started firing once he saw the silhouettes of my two buddies on the flight deck. And when I opened up, due to the fact that they didn't expect me, they didn't see me at all. When I opened up, I scared the guy and he dropped the RPG in the water.
An RPG is rocket-propelled grenade.
A rocket-propelled grenade, correct. It is a ridiculously overpowered way to just blow things up. It's extremely destructive. If that thing hits a ship, we would have been done. If it hit us anywhere, if it hit us in the flight deck, we have fuel tanks back there. The oil lab is back there where they maintain and monitor the oil in the engine. Not to mention my equipment was back there, and that stuff's flammable. If they hit us in the middle of the ship, there's a tank there. Not to mention that's where all our torpedoes were. And if they hit us in the front, that's where our hazmat locker was, our hazardous material locker. So if we got hit, we were done.
It sounds like your ship would fall into the category of a target-rich environment.
You could say that. You know what? They used to call us torp sponges. So we have something that if we have an HVU, a high value unit, like a carrier's rolling through and we're on a mission and out of nowhere, a torpedo comes and there's no way to, to chase it off using torpedo deterrence. We got to jump in front of it.
How did you know that they had an RPG if they dropped it in the water?
They told on themselves. They all got split up and they were sat down and the interrogator went through and questioned them. And I guess that new guy gave up everything. Because not only did they tell it to that, or tell it to the translator and our guys, but they told that to the FBI, but that's later on.
The bottom line is these guys were just run-of-the-mill pirates with high-powered weapons, and it was dark. They were thinking that you were just some kind of a big merchant vessel or something that was just going to give up easily. They didn't even realize that this was a U.S. warship they were attacking.
I guess not. If they had known that it was a U.S. warship, they might have, gotten caught just so they could have not be pirates. Maybe there's that. I've considered that, but that's kind of a hindsight, I guess.
So the next day you found their mothership and...
We got those two on board. Those 5 of them were split up in the way that they were detained. So we had the 3 on one side of the ship. We had 2 on the other side of the ship. And while I'm still standing my watch, I see these guys daily. So I'm still on the second deck looking down. I see these guys every day. These are the guys that tried to kill me.
And how are they detained? Are they just like handcuffed to a rail or something? Or is there like a cell or something that you keep them in?
No, they were treated very well because, the whole Geneva Convention, because if we pulled into port and they said anything anyway, that could throw their case out just about. They're not supposed to be mistreated. And I'm cool with that. I understand maybe they're in dire situations. Maybe they'd all been shanghaied. Maybe they just wanted a more stable environment. And hell, a U.S. federal prison could be more stable than the way Somalia is run. So I understand. And that's fine. They weren't like zip tied every day. They had cots. They were able to to do whatever. They were able to exercise every day. They were able to pray. You know, they're Muslim. They were able to pray. They were treated fairly. And it's just crazy knowing those are my attackers and I get to see them every day. They got 3 hots in the cot.
So you've got 5 Somali men under arrest in U.S. custody.
Mm-hmm.
What are the options? What do you do with these guys?
Africa Partnership Station, again, like I said, it was designed so that way Eastern African countries could jail and prosecute and, you know, have the supplies to detain these people. And I guess at some point in time, they asked for more money. They were denied said money. And they said that, you know, we can go ahead and fuck ourselves and we have to take them. The fact of the matter is I couldn't pull into port with my ship, USS Nicholas, could not pull into port with these detainees. If we're pulling in a friendly country, we can't pull in with these guys. So we had to wait until the FBI or the higher ups could come up with an idea of what to do with these guys. So that means we were out to sea for an extra week or two, which, let me explain, that got kind of rough. The longest my ship was ever out to sea was from the voyage from Virginia to wherever we were going. So across the Atlantic. And the reason being, you have to go up and around. If you make a beeline, if a U.S. naval ship or any naval ship makes a beeline from one country next to the next, it's considered an act of war. So no matter where you're going, you kind of have to make a roundabout voyage to get there.
So that way your approach is always not a surprise. You're kind of announcing yourself, sort of.
Correct. That's usually the longest. As soon as we get to port, we'd go back out to sea for maybe, I'd say max 4 days at that point in time. My ship couldn't handle a lot of stores past that. I mean, we weren't as efficient as something as big as like a carrier is. Of course, those things can just stay out to sea. But as far as we go, we need to pull in every once in a while. We need to get fuel. We need to get food, stores, mail.
So you were waiting out at sea all this time for the FBI to come.
Mm-hmm. What ended up happening is we were out there for so long. We were out for like another week or two. And usually in the Navy, you get 2 entrees per meal. You get, blah, 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 blah. So chow, it eventually got to the point where we weren't getting any food. We weren't getting stores yet. We had to start like calling out, asking the superiors, hey man, like when are we going to be able to get stores? When are we going to be able to we have nothing. We ran out of food in the ship's store. I mean, I've heard it's equivalent to prison in the sense that like when you're on the ship out to sea, you're stuck where you are. You're confined to where you are. You're wearing a uniform. You know everybody. And you have a ship store you could buy stuff at. You can even buy cigarettes there. I don't know if they still do that, but you could buy cigarettes there. You're not going anywhere. You're out to sea. You're in the middle of the ocean. Where are you going to go? So we ran out of everything. I'm talking like cup noodles, candy, cigarettes were running out. So a sister ship that was running operations in the area, it was a landing craft, came up and they had to come and they had to bring us stuff. They were like they were throwing us stuff from the ship's store. It was crazy. We ran out of entrees. We got to 1 entree and we ran out of rice, which is unheard of. Finally, the FBI was able to come via helicopter and they scooped these guys up and away they went. And we proceeded to finally go to our next port.
How long after they were picked up did the court case actually begin? And the court case was in the U.S., right?
Correct. They were taken back to Virginia. And so it was a federal case. After we were done with the deployment, we pulled back in and NCIS came on board. And I have to say, NCIS, they were just terrifying people to be around. They were so matter of fact. There was no joking with these guys. The TV show doesn't even explain it. These guys were balls to the wall, all information. What happened? What happened with this? What happened with that? Tell me about this. Okay, well, that sounds wrong. Tell me about it again. I'm like, Jesus, dude, like, like these guys are just nuts to be around. So they started doing their investigation on the ship and I had to talk to them every day for, I can't even explain. I don't even remember how long. They were taking ships from my vantage point. They also climbed the mast and lo and behold, there was a hole in the mast. They had shot directly above my head. If it were at a lower angle, they would have shot between the plates and hit me. It was crazy. Apparently it was directly over me. So we go to court We look like a living Norman Rockwell painting. There's just a bunch of sailors in uniform in a dimly lit room waiting in the back. I was very nervous about the trial because this was a federal thing, and I don't know. I don't know how to feel. I've never been to court before, and here are all these people, and they're looking for me. My testimony is eventually going to put these guys, in prison. So there's a bunch of us there, but there's like a dozen of us or so, everyone who was involved in the whole thing. And we're all there in this back room. I remember the first day, I didn't testify the first day, but I just, people were leaving the room one at a time. They're being called in and bam, 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 they're gone. The next thing I remember about the trial is having to testify. And it was fucking terrifying in this courtroom. You got this jury. There's like mad people in it, if I recall correctly. And there are these 5 guys sitting on the bench. And what I thought was really interesting is one of the NCIS agents that questioned me when the ship pulled in was presenting all this information and questioning me on the stand. When we had gone through the whole investigation, once they got back, they took the pictures. I signed and dated this CD, and they took it and they sealed it in front of me. And it wasn't until that day in trial, months and months later, that he walks up and he just hands me the CD, and they said, we want you to open that and we want you to put it in such and such. And I was like, all right. Zip. I pull it out. They said, is that your signature? I said, yep. They said, is that your handwriting? I said, yeah, that's my handwriting. And we went ahead and put it to disk, and it shows a 360 view of where I'm standing. You could look up, down, left, right. It was crazy. So you look all around this place. They said, is that your view? I said, yes. And then I had to point to those guys. They said, do you recognize them? I said, yeah, I recognize them because these are the guys that were detained once, I had visually seen them. I'd seen them every day for a while. So I pointed at them. They thanked me for my testimony, and I was at the door.
Okay, so all 5 of them were convicted.
Mm-hmm.
And this is like a milestone. This was the first piracy trial conviction in the U.S. Since like 1820.
1820, almost 200 years.
Yeah.
Isn't that wild?
5 Somali men are facing life in prison after being convicted of piracy following an attack on a U.S. Navy ship. Prosecutors claim the men, all in their mid-20s, attacked the USS Nicholas after mistaking it for a merchant vessel. The court's verdict is the first in a piracy case in America in nearly 200 years. They were arrested in April in waters near Djibouti. The men's lawyers say they were fishermen who'd been forced by criminals to attack the vessel. One of the accused told investigators he'd been promised $30,000 for a successful mission. The trial took place in the town of Norfolk, in the U.S. state of Virginia, one of the largest naval bases in the world and home port to the American ship involved.
I want you to think about how you would answer these questions. Do you have a business? Do you need to make that business more visible to potential customers? Do you need to increase your brand awareness? Do you need access to new audiences? If you answered yes to any of those questions, I'm going to let you in on a little secret that most entrepreneurs don't even know about yet. You can grow your business, get new client leads, and get your message out to tons of prospective customers by doing this one thing, being a guest on a podcast. And not just one podcast, but lots and lots of podcasts. That's one of the best ways I've found to grow this podcast and my business, and many business owners are using this same method. It's like your secret weapon to give you a huge competitive advantage over your competition. But how does this work? How do you get set up to be interviewed on a bunch of podcasts? Well, my friend Jessica Rhodes invented the podcast guesting industry back in 2013. She and her business partner, Margie, and their whole team are passionate about one thing: getting you booked as a guest on podcasts so that you can promote your business and your brand to the listeners of those shows. And coming up on August 10 and 11, they're conducting a 2-day virtual conference to show you exactly how it all works. The conference is called Monetize the Mic, and they're going to give you the tactical strategies and actionable advice to grow your business and your brand to new heights. The cost for this 2-day conference is just $27, and you can secure your seat at this affiliate link, which is whatwasthatlike.com/conference. This is how you introduce your business to new clients and customers without ever leaving your home. Millions of people listen to podcasts, and some of them are your future customers, but they have to know you exist. This ad is the only time you'll hear about this conference on this show, so do it now. Go get your ticket to the Monetize the Mic conference at whatwasthatlike.com/conference. There was a statement from the U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia, and his name is Neil McBride, and he made a statement after the conviction. I'm just going to read this. Today marks the first jury conviction of piracy in more than 190 years, said U.S. Attorney McBride. These 5 Somali pirates were convicted of an armed assault on the high seas against what they thought was a merchant vessel, but turned out to be a U.S. Navy frigate engaged in counter-piracy operations off the Horn of Africa. Modern-day pirates not only threaten human lives, but also disrupt international commerce by extorting hundreds of millions of dollars in ransom payments. Today's conviction demonstrates that armed attacks on U.S.-flagged vessels are crimes against the international community and that pirates will face severe consequences in U.S. courts. And that's what they faced. What was their sentence?
It was, multiple life sentences, pretty much.
So they're not getting out anytime.
No. And honestly, I don't know. I'm still kind of up in the air about it. I think they learned their lesson at this point in time. It's been, 11 years? I mean, there's no real lesson to learn besides stop shooting at people and shit. But it sucks. It sucks. I mean, these guys are, I don't know. Plus, they're not even in their own country. They need a translator for everything that they do. They have to stick together now. These are all things that I've kind of thought of, and it sucks.
Yeah, that's what one of the things I was wondering about is it was your testimony that sent these men to prison for life. I mean, obviously it was their behavior that sent them there, but do you feel any guilt about that at all, or any regret or anything?
I think it sucks. It kind of, it fucked me up at first. I'm not going to lie. It really fucked me up at first. Cause I was like, oh my God, I wasn't the only one who saw what happened. And when I fired to protect my shipmate. We had done nothing wrong. We were just there. I'm not going to do the whole, they started a thing again because this is more serious when we're talking about it this time. But honestly, fuck, man, they shot at us. And then, not to mention, if I hadn't pulled the trigger, would they have hit us with the RPG? Maybe they recognized that we were military and were going to try to blow us the fuck up and get out of Dodge. I mean, that could have been a thought on their mind. Otherwise, why would you blow up the merchant ship that you're looking at? So you're actually pushing questions that I hadn't thought of at this point. But
well, there's no reason you don't have any reason to feel guilty. But the thing is, sometimes when you go through a situation like this, you have feelings of, I'm not going to say guilt because you're not guilty of anything, but you feel bad that these guys are going to be in prison. And like you said, they may have been forced into doing this, but they forced you to defend yourself.
Yeah.
As well.
That again, that's mostly why I don't feel bad. Cause honestly, what would have happened if I didn't? Either these 5 guys went to prison or they would have blown up 180 of us and we would have died out right there. So I had a kid at that point in time. I have to go to work. Not to mention my boy Scoon. He was in the back. I thought they shot Scoon. No, they're not going to do that. They're not going to get anybody else on my ship. I mean, it's like I said, it's just a real tight community between all of us. And I've been working with all these. I was on my ship for 6.5 years. That's a long ass time. I'd seen like 2 full shift changes of people come around that ship. I knew all these guys. These are all my shipmates. And that's a lasting thing. You threaten one, man. I got to say, even if it was the way it was still a fair fight. There was 2 of us shooting. The way that we were positioned, we had 3 guns, but the 3rd gun couldn't even reach them. Again, these are all things that I never really thought about until you asked, but I used to say happy anniversary to Mark Scoon, my buddy Scoon in the back, that was on the flight deck. every April 1st, I would say happy anniversary to him until he stopped saying it back to me. And I finally understood that messed with him. Now I know how to minimize things, and I've done that my whole life. I haven't lived like the easiest life, but I know how to minimize. So at some point in time, I said, I might be messing with him unintentionally by saying happy anniversary to him. So I stopped. Now, I had to go talk to a couple people because I fired my weapon at somebody. I was fine. And I was very adamant about, no, there's no PTSD involved. Well, 9 years later, I was sitting with my kid and he's like, Dad, do you want to play Call of Duty? I said, sure, man. He throws Call of Duty on. As soon as the game starts, there I heard gunfire and I couldn't tell where it was from. Now, mind you, this is 9 years. I love action movies. I'm a huge movie buff. Nothing ever made me feel the way it did for that 1 second where I heard gunfire and I didn't know where it was coming from. I paused the game. I told my kid, I'll be right back. I gotta go. Okay. I'll be back. And I started shaking really bad. It was difficult to walk. And I walked to where I was somewhere quiet and I started bawling uncontrollably. I could not stop. I had this, I thought I was going to die. I had a horrible panic attack. I had to go I started, I had really shitty Wi-Fi, man. I'm talking like, bumfucked Egypt, Texas. So I'm trying to get a hold of whoever I can. I'm trying to get a hold of this veterans hotline, and my Wi-Fi is so spotty. And eventually I think I got a hold of like a suicide prevention line because I had to talk to somebody. I didn't know what was going on with myself. And finally I got to talk to somebody and I was able to calm down and I was able to realize I'm safe. And the whole reason why I brought that up is because you never know what your brain is going to do to you. Dude, it took 9 years for that to happen. So I suggest to anybody, if something traumatic happened, talk to somebody, because you never know when it's going to kick in. Like I said, I got a hold of Mark. I said, man, what the fuck, dude? I said, what is happening to me right now? And he was like, bro, that's it. He said, your brain just clicked and it took that one thing 9 years later. So talk to somebody. It's absolutely worth it. I know everybody that gets on here says something about it, but it's got to be reiterated. And somebody once put it into perspective for me. They said, I was talking to my best friend's little brother. He was in the army. He saw some horrible shit. I was like, dude, that, what I went through was bad. I was like, but yours sucked way worse. He said, no, dude. He said, listen to me. He said, sure, one thing might be worse than the other, but it still sucks. It's all relative. It doesn't matter. You can't really compare trauma to people because you don't know how people are going to take trauma. So you gotta talk to somebody. Save your own self.
That's a perfect example of you need to talk to somebody even though you don't think anything.
Oh, yeah.
You don't think you've been affected by it because you didn't even realize that how it affected you.
Oh, yeah. Shit, I'd heard gunshots since then. I live in Texas. But it was, I don't know what it was. It was just that one specific. It might have been the AK round. My kids played this game before in front of me. I've watched him play. I've played it with him. It's just that one day.
Well, you were out on a boat. I know you were on a warship, but you certainly weren't expecting to exchange fire or be in conditions like that.
Not at all. It could happen to anybody, anywhere, anytime. I did speak to somebody eventually. I went recruiting, which was a horrible, horrible idea. If you're listening to me, if you're in the military and you hear this, don't go recruiting if you don't have to. Boy, you need some mental fortitude for that. But I was speaking to a therapist for a little bit and she was really cool. She didn't bullshit me at all. I guess she had military in her family and some brothers. So when she met me, she knew exactly how to handle my bullshit.
I understand that for your part in this situation, you got a medal.
Absolutely. So the morning that April 1st, we woke up as we were picking up the other two In the mother skiff, myself and Schoonmaker got called up to the pilot house, up to the bridge. And the captain was up there, and he was up there with Command Master Chief. And they were so cool. They were like, man, you guys, that was a dangerous thing. You guys did a great job. And they gave us a NAM, which is a Navy, Marine Corps Achievement Medal, or NAM for short. And they gave us a spot NAM. Like, I guess after the gunfight was over, the CO went and did whatever. And then on the spot, he just typed this award up and sent it in for authorization. And bam, we got it within hours. And it was cool. They have a little mock-up one that you get. It has like a binder clip on it that they just put on your coveralls and the metal hangs. And you get to walk around the ship for it, but you got to bring it back eventually. And they hand you a real one. And that was awesome.
Well, it was well-deserved.
I thank you.
I've got one final question, and this may be something that some of the listeners might be wondering about.
Mm-hmm.
You said when this whole thing started that you had your iPod in, your earphones.
Yes, I did.
What were you listening to?
I'll never forget. I was listening to Deftones. That's my favorite band. And that was during the gunfight, which Adrenaline, it was their first album. Come on. Oh my God. Beautiful music. Mwah. Very aggressive though. I don't know if everybody's going to like it, but as we took off and we started to chase them, my adrenaline was pumping. I knew that it was going to take a little bit because the second engine was barely kicking on. And I switched my iPod over to Eminem because the Re-Up album had just came out. It's a great album. I was trying to keep myself in the mood. It was also like, 1:00 in the morning. I'm dog ass tired and I just got in the gunfight.
So you had you were in a gunfight and you had kind of your own soundtrack going the whole time.
Right? It was awesome. The Navy, even with that and other things that happened, the Navy was a lot of fun. Spent 11 years in the Navy. I don't regret any of it. I loved it. I've been to I'd say I've been to 44, 45 countries on 3 other continents. It was awesome. I've seen some cool shit. I've traveled to some great places. I went through the Panama Canal. That was awesome. I went great white shark diving in South Africa. You can't beat stuff like that. The Navy was great. And I'm 4th generation military. I've heard these stories all day. If anybody's interested, I really suggest joining the Navy. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I have a few things I want to tell you about before we get to this week's listener story. First up, I've had a little issue with Instagram lately. My Instagram account is What Was That Like? No spaces. And if you follow me there, you get a DM from me asking if you have any crazy stories that might work for the podcast. And for the most part, this works great. But every once in a while, Instagram sees me sending out all those DMs and their computers think it might be spam or something. So for a day or two, I can't send any DMs. So there are a few people who followed me and didn't get a DM from me as promised. And I hate that. But unfortunately, there's not much I can do about it. But I'm still interested in hearing your story to see if it's a good fit for the show. You can just go to the website and click where it says Submit Your Story, and I read and reply to every one of those. Do you use Reddit? I'm talking about the hugely popular site at reddit.com. That's reddit.com. I love Reddit, and I'm on there pretty regularly, and there's actually a subreddit for this podcast. If you'd like to join it, the sub is r/whatwasthatlike with no spaces. And if you'd like to get this podcast without any ads, as well as the exclusive bonus episodes featuring actual 911 emergency calls, you can do that by becoming a patron for just $5 a month. Full details are at whatwasthatlike.com/support. I had an interesting thing happen recently. Or I should say, my wife had an interesting thing happen. Her car was struck by lightning. Fortunately, she wasn't in it at the time. She had just parked it about 10 minutes earlier, and there was one of those huge lightning strikes, super loud. We have this pretty regularly here in Florida in the summertime. And she discovered that the passenger side mirror was destroyed and glass was all over the ground. A big chunk of concrete had been taken out of that parking spot, and there was a large tree limb that had come off a nearby tree and dented in the roof. And then she found out that a bunch of things didn't work. The air conditioning, the radio, door locks, the electrical things. So she's without a car at the moment while all those things get fixed. I told her, just think, if you had actually been driving the car when this happened, you could have been a guest on the podcast. But it's an interesting story anyway. And speaking of interesting stories, we now go to this week's listener story, which needs a trigger warning due to a first-hand account of domestic violence. Stay safe. I'll see you in 2 weeks.
So my first relationship out of high school was abusive and I almost died. Very early on, he told me the typical, all my exes are crazy bit, and for no good reason. I just believed it. Occasionally, he would yell at me and scream if I couldn't hang out with him, and I justified that as being okay because I thought he was hurt and I felt like his actions weren't his choice. Obviously, this just got gradually worse. It went from yelling to throwing things to shoving and raising fists very quickly under a year's time. The time he almost killed me, we were house sitting for my mother while she was on a trip for her birthday, and we had gotten into a nonviolent fight. I decided that I was going to sleep on the couch, and before I went to sleep, I texted a friend of mine the phrase, "I don't think I'm cut out for romantic relationships." While I was asleep, he read that, and it sent him over the edge. There was a lockbox in the room because my mom's house was a rental, and that's where she still kept the spare key. Lockboxes are sturdy, and they're solid metal and heavy. I had kind of woken up when he entered the room, and I had hardly looked at him when he threw this lockbox at my head. He was only a few feet from me, so it was pretty close range. I remember it as just a sudden white flash, and my body felt bad. I fell off the couch and started to crawl, and that's when he picked it up and hit me with it again. It was another white flash, and then my hearing was really muffled, and all I could hear was my heartbeat in my ears. That was my oh shit moment, because tunnel vision started kicking in, and my body felt like it was underwater. All I could think was, fuck, I'm hurt, I have to get help. I somehow was able to crawl to the bathroom with my phone before he could catch me. I have cuts in my memory here, because I only remember shutting and locking the door. I don't actually remember grabbing my phone or anything else. While I was in the bathroom, I was really dizzy and it was hard to move. I don't know how long I was in there or how long he was outside of the door, but at some point I realized he was just pounding on the door and screaming to be let in. I finally came to the moment where I thought, okay, I have to call 911. I have to call for help. He's going to kill me. I'm going to die. I have to call for help. So I pick up my phone and I'm trying to dial, but the screen's black. And I'm really disorientated, but it's not working. And then I realized that the battery had been removed from my phone. So before he hit me, he had taken the battery out of my phone and then returned my phone to the same spot. So I couldn't call for help. I remember feeling sleepy and scared. When I finally felt my head, it was just this burning hot lump behind my ear. The swelling felt like it was as big as my hand, and I didn't know what to do, so I got into the bathtub, turned on the cold water, and I just sat there pressing the lump on my head against the cold faucet, hoping it would help somehow. Eventually, I fell asleep, and he got in, but at that point, he was just doing this thing where he was crying and saying, "Oh my God, my life is ruined, my life is ruined," and he just kept saying that. I couldn't talk. I just felt dizzy and sick, and he was trying to get me to follow his fingers with my eyes, and I couldn't do it. The next day, I had work, and I was still really woozy and in pain. The girls at my job could see the swelling under my hair, and halfway through my shift, I went home and begged him to take me to urgent care. By that time, he had calmed down and was in the reconciliation phase, so he agreed. For some reason at the urgent care, they just let my boyfriend go in with me to see the doctor, despite putting down head injury on the check-in, so I had to lie to this doctor about what happened. The doctor looked at him and looked at me for a really long time before explaining that I had an internal contusion affecting my face, eye, and neck, and a temporal lobe concussion. He looked at me and told me that if my injury was just 1 inch forward, I would have had internal bleeding in my brain and died, and that I'm lucky I didn't. He told me to go to an ER immediately if my symptoms got worse, and that was it. So we went home, and I was okay enough at that time. A week later, he slammed that side of my head into a door frame repeatedly when I was trying to run from him during another violent incident. Another time after that, he almost killed us both in the car driving 90 miles an hour. And the abuse didn't really end until I was finally able to move without telling anyone where I was going to go. So, not a lot of time has passed, but he's completed schooling to be a social worker now, and it terrifies me. I still have residual effects from the concussion, like brain fog and issues with facial blindness. The scariest thing for me is that he worked up to being that violent. I wasn't the only victim, and I think about what could happen to someone else all the time, especially because he's faced no repercussions. I also think about how many others like him there are.